the Shark Deck.
Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news, and I lost my script. It's usually here. Where did you go? Here it is. John, why don't you edit that out? Because that's not fun. That's what really happened. From the Valdosta Daily Times, they spoke to Dan Whitney. You might know him as Larry the Cable Guy. Dan explained, coming up through the ranks at the time, using Larry the Cable Guy was like a brand that took off in a big way. It was a really crazy thing. I was just a comedian, and all of this was such a whirlwind. I remember when I first met Larry, we had Jeff Foxworthy coming up to Sirius, and his publicist was like, hey, you guys want to talk to Larry the Cable Guy? And we were like, we don't know who that is. Sure, yeah, we'll talk to him. We had no idea. So I think we made friends with Larry about 30 seconds before he really blew up. Dan/Larry is an awesome dude. If you go down on the feed, he's one of the few guests that I've had on the show over the last few years. A true friend, and I always laugh at the interview. If you listen back, spoilers, I actually had to wrap up the interview because I had to jump on a Zoom call for work, and Larry made a joke about how he put my kids through school, and I laughed, and I'm like, it's pretty much true. Love that guy. Dan said his management team at the time pushed him to use the Larry the Cable Guy name for everything. The team was aggressive if media mentioned his real name in stories about the comedian. Whitney laughed, saying he never had a problem using his real name and doesn't now, and he wishes he had used his name in the Cars movies, but he's fine being known as Larry the Cable Guy. He said, I'm a country kid from Nebraska who grew up in Florida and went to school in Georgia. I've lived in Florida for 30 to 40 years. Now, the article points out, and I've talked about this in the past, his phone voice is familiar. It sounds close to the voice you expect to hear in a phone interview with Larry the Cable Guy, but it's not until he starts talking in character that one realizes his real speaking voice has a hint of Southern flavor, but nothing like the dipped-in kudzu and sweet tea of Larry the Cable Guy. He could turn the voice off and on like water. I've talked about this in the past when I've hung out with him. Sometimes you're talking to Dan, and sometimes you're talking to Larry the Cable Guy, and it's not like he's the Joker, but sometimes he slips into Larry the Cable Guy, but when you're backstage, Dan is usually hanging out. His first gig as a stand-up in 1985. In 1988, he quit his day job and began performing full-time. Said, I loved making people laugh. Will there be another blue-collar comedy tour? And I'll remind you, both Bill Engvall and Ron White retired at the end of last year. But I agree with what Larry says here. He goes, you've got 4 guys in their 60s, and points out he himself has cut back on doing one-man shows to spend time with his wife and children. He usually books performances to coincide with golf tournaments. But as for the blue-collar comedy tour, and I think he's right here, it's probably not going to happen, but I could see in another 5 years or so doing a reunion thing in a casino in Vegas. I agree. There's money on the table. I could see that happening. The New Yorker spoke to Sarah Silverman about her recent special, and she said, I never think about doing a special. I never write stand-up aiming for a special. I just never think about it. This is my 4th special, and I've been doing stand-up for 33 years. I did a pilot for HBO right before the pandemic, and part of that deal was a special. And then they didn't pick up the pilot, but I still owed them a special. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't do stand-up for the longest time. And then stand-up came back, and we get a call from HBO, and they're like, it's time. Sarah said, I've never owed a special like that. Usually I'll have an hour and someone says, can you do a special? And I go, yeah, all right. She does seem bummed that HBO didn't pick up the pilot, telling the New Yorker, it's funny because I was really bummed about it. I was like, they need this show. It was a great pilot, a political half-hour weekly. It was like a John Oliver or Bill Maher type show. I was gutted. I was so bummed. When a pilot doesn't go, you're always bummed. I was like, can't believe they're blowing this opportunity. The pilot, of course, it didn't air and no one will see it, but 2 years later, everything we were talking about came to the fore. Now it seems trite, but it was about the algorithms of social media. That brings us to The Daily Show. Remember she hosted it for a week back in times when there were writers and late night shows were a thing? The New Yorker asked, have you ever been in conversations to host your own late night show or take over from one of the existing hosts? Sarah said, no, I had a blast doing it, meaning The Daily Show, but that's never been something I wanted in my life. I love doing odd jobs. The Daily Show was so exhilarating and such a lesson in immediacy. You're sitting with a producer and she's like, use it or move on. She's keeping you on track. I remember when I hosted SNL at the after party, I was sitting with Lorne Michaels and Martin Short, and Lorne said that Marty was going to do a thing on Update tonight, and I was like, oh my God, that would have been incredible. And Lorne said, Martin's problem is that he wants everything to be perfect when the truth is it just has to be good. And I thought that was so funny, but when I guest hosted The Daily Show, I immediately understood it. Perfect is the enemy of good. It's about using what works and making it the best it can be. How does Sarah pick projects? She says, there's been a couple things I did for money. I get this amount of money and hopefully no one will see it. All sorts of variables go into decisions. Doing a rich guy's daughter's quinceañera? Yeah, that's a money gig. Great. I got to do a commercial for Uber Eats. That was a godsend. It was awesome. A small part in a movie I think is awesome. That's great. I keep my overhead low. I'm not one for purses. Gives me an incredible amount of freedom. There could be something where I go, yeah, this looks good, but there are so many crowd scenes and those take too long. I make decisions based on quality of life. Sometimes I say no to stuff because I'm scared or lazy. I'm trying not to do that so much, but I also love being home. She sounds very grounded. I liked her most recent special a lot. Currently number 9 on the Best of 2023 list. Salon spoke to David Cross. They were curious how David came up with the name of his tour, Worst Daddy in the World, and they said, was there voting? Did your daughter choose it? Cross said, oh yeah, there was the subcommittee, which is done out of Oslo in Norway, and they meet quarterly, and they just go through everything, and then 538 has something to do with it. I know they're involved, but yeah, it was submitted by my daughter, and I went through all the levels you have to go through, and then I emerged on top. Can I tell you, I'm impressed with how today's podcast is coming out. I wrote this on Friday. There was absolutely no news, and I went into Google and typed in every single comedian I could think of, which is how I went up with the Larry the Cable Guy story and these next two I'm going to do. This is pretty good. I've shared this before. There's a story about Tom Seaver late in his career, and the pitching coach comes out and goes, you know, you have nothing today? And Seaver goes, yeah, but they don't know that. And I think if I didn't tell you that I'm kind of shucking and jiving today, not sure you would have noticed. Johnny makes a little proud of today's podcast. Lewis Black spoke to the LA Times, and they said, COVID drinking, was that a thing? Lewis said, I was pretty good with that. I gave myself like 2 glasses of wine, and I said to my shrink, it's got me such worried, and the shrink said, better than lithium. Glasses of wine are probably better than any of the antidepressants you could take, and it worked. What I did do is I binge-watched a lot of TV. And part of the reason I binge-watch, beside the distraction level, is the fact that I've waited my whole life for TV to be that type of mature and be that smart and have that level of acting, that level of writing. Comedian Omid Jalili caught speeding while desperate for the toilet. The 57-year-old comedian was stopped on the edge of Regent's Park after a copper spotted him flying along the road in his luxury Lexus. The officer told a magistrate's court, as soon as I stopped the driver, he said he needed a wee. The officer said he questioned Jalili to see if he knew that the road had a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which I've never been on Albany Street, but that's ridiculous. You can't drive a car 20. Jalili said, I haven't been down here in many years. Speed 30, 40. I must be doing 45 or something. The officer said, I showed him the speed gun. He was doing 47. I informed him that I could see that he was flying towards me. I asked for his driving license, and he asked me to be quick as he needed to go to the toilet. This happened back in November. Last week on Tuesday, a magistrate fined the comedian 660 pounds, ordered him to pay a 264-pound victim surcharge plus 100 pounds in costs. Yikes, guys. Come on. Also imposed 6 penalty points on his license. Jalili was given a 200-pound fine in March last year for speeding by Gatwick Airport and received a 1,300-pound penalty in 2013 for speeding on the M4. At that time, he joked to the court, comedian humbly asking for leniency. In 2008, he lost his license after racking up more than 12 penalty points. He got a second ban in 2012 after being caught driving without a valid license or insurance. He said, you should never do jokes in court. The judge said to me, you have 36 points on your license and another 18 pending, which takes you up to 54, which is a UK record. We're going to ban you from driving for 6 months. Do you have anything to say? I said, could you give me a lift to the station, Your Honor? And the judge said, that's not funny. Did you guys check out mypostglow.com yet? What are you doing? Get over there, mypostglow.com, and they sponsor today's daily comedy news. Give your child the ultimate gift of love and recognition. Create a custom masterpiece capturing their triumphs and celebrating their dedication in high school sports. These are awesome. Get a personalized article printed on metal that will last a lifetime. Let's start there. Printed on metal will last. Yeah, so this isn't like a piece of paper. You don't have to deal with a frame. Metal. Nice and easy. Hanging on the wall. All right, John, what is this? Well, I'll tell you. First step, I'm going to answer a couple questions about your kid and the milestones. So like, I don't know, maybe it's Sally scored 3 goals in the championship game. Let's say it's that, okay? So you're going to ask you a couple questions. You're going to fill it out. Then you're going to schedule your design consultation. You do a virtual meeting. You work on the article and the layout. You can make some changes. You can personalize it some more. That's it. And then it shows up. You're a parent. You know what happens. You get caught up in the day-to-day. You lose sight of the progress. You're like, oh, yeah, great game, 3 goals anyway. We got to pick up your brother, and I got to work tomorrow, and I got to record the podcast. You know how it goes? I'm telling you, I preach to my children. Remember the good times. You don't always have an awesome day. When you have an awesome day, celebrate it. Recognize the hard work that you've done. Things don't just happen. You put the work in. When you get the result, celebrate it. It's too easy to take success for granted. Take the time. Celebrate. Remember. Cherish your memories. So I'm looking at examples here. Here's one. A young woman in the pose of about to shoot a basketball, and it says, Sarah's buzzer beater victory. There's a bunch of pictures of the game, one of the team, has the date, 2/19/2023. Where did this happen? San Diego. So you get a custom article made, and it comes on metal. How do I place an order with My Post Glow, John? Well, visit their Create a Story page on mypostglow.com. You get 11 by 14 or 16 by 20. All right, John, how long does it take to receive the order? Once the layout is approved, it typically takes less than 2 weeks for delivery to your door. Shipping is free. You can customize it. You can check it out before they print it. And special offer running right now. You got to do this before July 4th. You've got some time, but do it today. What are you waiting for? mypostglow.com. What's the offer, John? 10% off before the 4th of July. 10% off. mypostglow.com. Personalized story, photos, and design. Free gift wrapping and shipping. mypostglow.com. Do it. You know, I'm still not over this driving record thing. If you have the record for points, you only get suspended for 6 months. I think if you have the record, lifetime ban. No? Yes? Yes. Do you like Rick and Morty? Remember they broke up with Justin Roiland? Justin Roiland, importantly, was the voice of Rick and the voice of Morty. Seems like a big deal. Adult Swim president Michael Oweline was talking to French publication Premiere and said, Roiland will be replaced in dubbing. Voices are obviously super important in an animated series. And of course, none of us wanted to go through what we went through, but I've been in animation for a long time, and I know what makes a series is it's different parts coming together. I'll jump in. Like the voices. If the voices are obviously a big part, there's also the writing of the characters and their design. He added the new voice act. This worries me. He added the new voice actor would simply not do an impersonation of Roiland, and he has reason to believe the transition will go well. Here's the part that worries me. He compared it to Bugs Bunny, which has had many voice actors over the years. Time out. Full time out, okay? I'm making a tea, and I'm stepping back from the huddle, and I'm talking to you directly. Now, you've watched Bugs Bunny. The classic ones with Mel Blanc, that's what Bugs is supposed to sound like. Some of the ones in like the, 80s, 90s, not the best Bugs. It's like me doing Bugs Bunny. Do you want to hear what that sounds like? You do. What's up, Doc? That was terrible. Do you want Rick and Morty to be that bad? Do a Justin Roiland impression. Don't tell me that Bugs Bunny being voiced by different people is a good example of this. It's like Kermit the Frog. Have you heard some of the terrible Kermits over the years? Stop. Very worrisome. But the Adult Swimsuit says, I even think that for Rick and Morty we'll do even better. It'll be fine. It'll be great. Yeah. What We Do in the Shadows, Season 5 already, back on July 13th. If you're not familiar with What We Do in the Shadows, where you been, I'll dump it down. It's The Office Vampires. The show documents the nightly exploits of vampire roommates Nandor, Laszlo, played by the great Matt Berry, Nadja, and Colin Robinson as they navigate the modern world of Staten Island with the help of their human familiar, Guillermo. This season, energy vampire Colin Robinson looks to run for political office as Guillermo might finally get his wish and become an actual vampire. In true Guillermo fashion, it does not go as smoothly as expected. And that is your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And smash that like button. That's terrible. Is that what you want Rick and Morty to sound like? No. See you tomorrow. Who doesn't like vacations? Do you need some inspiration for your next road trip? Are you excited to get out there and explore the world again? Hi, I'm Johnny Mac. My podcast is called Travel is Back. Travel is Back is travel for regular people. We hop in the car, we fly coach, we use our miles, we eat at normal places, we stay at normal places. So what I do is I hop in the car, I grab my portable recorder, and I go somewhere. Season 3 kicks off with a road trip to Key West. You can check out the back catalog. There are popular episodes covering Chicago, Nashville, Vancouver, Seattle, a whole bunch more. Travel is Back, road trips for regular people. Follow the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your shows. These are quick, these are casual, and it's for regular people like you. Travel is Back.